afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to another masterclass at Miva. Today we have the honor of a very special guest, Tola Odeyemi. Tola Odeyemi is a seasoned technology and public policy expert with over 15 years of experience in the public and private sectors in Nigeria and across Africa. She was recently appointed as the Postmaster General and Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Postal Service. She's the first female in this position in the history of the organization. Prior to her appointment, Tola served as the head of government affairs at Binance, which is the world's largest blockchain and cryptocurrency ecosystem in sub-Saharan Africa. Before this, she worked at Uber Technologies as the head of public policy for West Africa. Tola's public sector career also spans federal and state governments in Nigeria. Her resume is really long. She has an undergrad degree in electrical engineering from Morgan State University in Maryland, and she also has a master's in systems engineering from the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
My name is Anyekeme Umo. I'm the VP of Operations at Miva Open University. In this masterclass, our theme is adaptive leadership. So we have a couple of questions that we would love for Tola to answer. And as always, after we're done with some of our questions, we'll give our students who are here in person and our students who are joining us online an opportunity to also ask some questions. Right. So to get us started, a little icebreaker. I think sometimes when we hear leadership, we can think that it's easy. Some people might think that if they're able to influence someone else, they can call themselves a leader. Do you think that the word leader and the word influencer can be interchanged? Like, no disrespect to social media influencers, but can they be called leaders?
So I think that the world has changed. I think maybe 60 years ago, in 1960, 1950, even up until the year 2000, right? The word leader was very confined to a certain category. So organizational leader, political leader, community leader, things like that. And with the advent of social media, you've seen another type of leadership. And it's sort of the precursor to my answer. So the answer is yes. You can actually use both words. Because at the end of the day, what leaders, traditional sense, and what influencers are trying to do is the same thing. They're trying to influence. A leader influences other people to join in a mission. An influencer influences people for a myriad of reasons, but at the end of the day, there's still a mission, there's a goal. So most social media influencers usually they rack up their followership, and I think what they do is they now monetize that followership, right? As opposed to a traditional leader who has a goal or a mission. But at the end of the day, both of them have goals and missions. It's just different. I think for the traditional leaders, probably a bit more, it's harder to quantify their impact. But with the social media influencer, it's, I think, a great KPI will be the dollars and cents from how much they make from their influencing. And I think in this day and age, number of followers. But I think that the only difference is what you want to influence people with. So you can be a social media influencer and you have a public good, right? You're driving. So you think of election periods, right? I don't have the statistics on Nigeria, but I was reading something earlier today about Taylor Swift, who put up a post in the last elections, and in 1 hour, 65,000 people, if you click, she had her own link in her bio, right. And in 1 hour, 65,000 people had registered for the right to vote in 1 hour after she put it up. So at that point in time, she was influencing and leading, right? And so I think both words can be used synonymously, but I think it's the end goal that sort of separates at the end of the day.
Thank you for that. So I guess before we get into the core of the topic proper, I think it would be really beneficial for our learners to really understand what adaptive leadership is. Can you share some thoughts on that?
So I think adaptive leadership, like leadership, I think it's just a subset of leadership. It's just the act of mobilizing people for a specific end goal, which is all leadership. But I think it focuses on complex situations. So there's leadership, there's everyday, what I call operational or technical leadership. There's adaptive leadership. So technical, or what I call operational leadership, is where you are leading in stable times. There's a set modus operandi for what you're doing. So for example, if you're a leader, and I'm going to use a very random example, in a store, or for example here at Miva, let me use here at Miva. So you're VP operations, right? I'm not sure what you do on a daily basis, but I'm sure you have a set when I come, their classes, make sure that this is done, make sure that that is done. And I think where you'll be thrown into sort of like when somebody now says, what you're doing now is a bit adaptive, and say, maybe in 2020, if you were here in 2020 with the COVID pandemic, and then all of a sudden all your classes, you had to then find a way to move every single thing to virtual, right? You have to find a way of, maybe there's a way of, you have to run your exams, even if there's a way you run your exams here, you have to find a way to do it virtually. So all of a sudden you're trying to solve your everyday problems, but the context for your problems has become more complex. So I think that's what it is. And I don't want to be too technical about it. And I think that the only other thing I think that would qualify what adaptive leadership, or the context in which adaptive leadership would apply, is that most times your problem statement, what you're trying to solve, is quite vague. So, I think as we discussed, I think the example I have, because I decided to I looked for the example I think that would drive home the point of adaptive leadership, and then show how the difference is actually in the problem you're trying to solve.
Okay, can you share that story?
So no, it's not my personal story.
Okay.
It's an example. You know that you sent the questions ahead. So one of the questions that I think was an example of, let me see, what was the example of adaptive?
Yes,
an organization. And actually, the example wasn't an organization. I looked at the example of Nelson Mandela and him becoming president of South Africa. And so the background to this story is, I don't know the age range of people here. I was going to say that, I'm not sure what the age range is, but then there's a time when Nelson Mandela and his issue was forefront for everybody globally. So Nelson Mandela had been in jail for 27 years during the apartheid regime in South Africa. And going into jail, what had done, he as well as the ANC party had been the forefront resistance against apartheid and the Dutch party in South Africa, right? And so himself, Thabo Mbeki, I don't know if that name rings a bell, and hundreds of other resistance fighters were thrown into jail for anti-state activities, right? And so you can imagine somebody who's at the forefront of resisting and hating a particular subset of people in South Africa who they thought, who were practicing a national policy of discrimination and racism, throw you in jail. And then you're then in jail for first decade, second decade. You see people come, people go. You've seen your warders, you've seen government, so people in government change, but your problem is still the same. And in reading his biography, it wasn't an autobiography, his biography, one thing that happened all along his 27 years was a shift in mindset in terms of this inane problem in South Africa of discrimination and racism, where there's a minority that is oppressing the majority, right? How do we solve it? And of course, he went into jail because there was an armed resistance, right? And throughout his 27 years, you can see, if you read it, there's a sort of gradual shift in mindset. By the time he came out from prison, he had concluded that the enemy was not apartheid or racism. The enemy was oppression. And he made a statement that, and I want to read the statement if I can find it, that the problem statement is that both the oppressor must be liberated just as the oppressed have to be liberated. At that point in time, he saw both himself as well as the wardens, the jailers, the president, and everybody as being caught in a cycle of oppression. Now, he came out in 1990. By 1994, he was voted in as the first Black president of South Africa. And what he did, I mean, a lot of steps that made him so famous, even more famous than he was in prison, was things like the Truth and Reconciliation committees that they set up, where everybody had to go, you all meet in your localities and sort of speak through the horrors that you had faced, either from as an oppressor or as the oppressed, right? And even things as far as even having lunch and dinners with his jailers. While he was in jail, he reached out to the president of South Africa, the apartheid president of South Africa, saying, look, we need to fix this problem. Because there was a deadlock. The apartheid regime couldn't move forward, the oppressed couldn't move forward. And the shift was, at the end of the day, there's an African or a Swahili, I don't know, concept of Ubuntu, where they say that our humanity is expressed in the humanity of others. So he probably saw himself apart from his oppressors. But by the end of the 27 years, he saw his humanity through the humanity of people who were oppressing him and his people. And so that's the story, right? Now, what would I bring out of this as adaptive? One, emotional intelligence, right? Even though he was after he became president, and he was saying, okay, both Africans and South Africans, the Africans being the Dutch, and then the South Africans have to work together. There were a lot of, both the Africans were a bit afraid that all these people that we've been oppressing are just going to destroy us. And then obviously the Africans are also like, why would we want to continue working with or being in the same society with these people who have hated and sort of decimated us, destroyed our families for centuries or decades or centuries, right? And so that's when he came up with the Truth and Reconciliation, so that everybody could see each other's humanity. That's one. And one of the things that makes him an adaptive leader is that even when he was in jail, he was a poster boy for the anti-apartheid protests and movements globally. And that not only was he sort of the poster face, but then what he also did, his personality allowed, because he was such a leader, his personality allowed the environment where even other people were now adapting, where other people, even in the ANC, who weren't in jail, could see themselves working side by side with even their former or their present oppressors, even before 1990. Yeah. And he was also an adaptive leader in that he was able to hold two conflicting ideas, freedom from oppressors, as well as freedom for oppressors at the same time in his head. So what did he do? He was able to embrace change, innovation and experimentation. I'm sure it wouldn't have been the wildest dreams of anybody that Nelson Mandela as president would have dinner with the person who was his warden in jail. Everybody would think the normal human thing is that person. In fact, I don't even know why that guy was still in South Africa.
Right.
Yeah, because you oppressed me for 27 years, I come out, become president. You're finished. I mean, that's normal human reaction, right? Yeah, normal human reaction. Courage and determination, not only to face his oppressors, but to also face the oppressed, his own people, and be like, we need to change the model for engagement. Do you understand? Like, that's courage on both sides. A customer-centric approach, and like, who are his primary customers? His own people. Now, regardless of how they think about their oppressors, he knows what they want, which is freedom. And he's bold enough to say, I know what you want as a customer. I'm going to get it done, even if it's a bit uncomfortable for you. And at the end of the day, South Africans, Black South Africans, disruption. It disrupted probably what was called the sort of anti-apartheid movement, because everybody was like, kill the Africans, but he's like, you know what? Liberate the oppressors, liberate the Africans themselves from their own sort of mental oppression. Because for you to oppress other people, there must be something off in your head. And then the resilience, 27 years, holding the same dream, I don't know how many people can hold that dream for 27 years in jail when all you get to do to get out of jail was to just say, I'm not doing this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Negotiation. Again, the art of negotiation. Negotiating again with the oppressor, with the oppressed as well. And then listen all around. So he's listening to South African, Black South Africans, he's listening to white South Africans, he's listening to global leaders, he's listening to African leaders. He's listening to everybody, and that way, listening to the truths, the untruths, filtering out what he needs, and then just charting a way forward. Since 1994, regardless of what is happening after he became the first Black president, something happened because it was only the Black president after that, meaning that he gave South Africans enough hope in themselves to know that they can lead and continue to lead. So even after he died, his form of adaptive leadership, and if you look at the ANC now, and even other, what was the Dutch party, DA and all those things, they're all mixed parties now. Before there was a fine line according to races, right? And because everybody now understands that there's no country without sort of every sort of element of society coming together to craft whatever version each political party thinks is the best for them. So back to adaptive leadership. So for me, those are the elements. And you can break it down. I didn't want to give any business case study. I wanted to give something that sort of the human experience, right?
Yeah.
And for me, that is what adaptive leadership is. So that shift in mindset, having emotional intelligence, understand what is done, having the courage, the resilience, being flexible in your thinking, but remaining committed to solving that problem. And what he did was, the first thing he did was distill down what the problem was correctly. It wasn't an oppressor oppressed. It was that both people needed to be liberated. And that was a breakthrough.
Because, with adaptive thinking, thinking outside of the box from the problem statement itself.
And the problem statement, a lot of other people in South Africa, the problem statement was the Dutch people need to leave. The Dutch people need to be gone. But for him, he thought through it properly from a human perspective. Right? In that my humanity expressed in everybody else's humanity. So for me, that is the classic example of adaptive leadership.
Thank you for that example. And for the principles that you distilled from it. I'm really curious, for maybe not only this Mandela example, but adaptive leadership in general. You've talked about a bit of measurement of it being that since Nelson Mandela became president, and even after he's passed, all of the presidents have been Black. What other ways, and so that shows continuity, and it's maybe a way to measure his adaptive leadership. But are there other ways that you would think about measuring the effectiveness of adaptive leadership, maybe now in a different context?
So if I look at it from like a regular sort of organization, so one is your KPI, so whatever you're trying to change, right? Like whatever the issue is, what are the indicators you're looking at? So is it productivity, efficiency, overall performance? So that's the first thing. If you're trying to solve a problem, is the problem solved? Right? So let's look for trying to find an example, right? And for any organization, if you are customer facing, is the customer satisfied? Right? So whatever you're trying to solve, whatever you're trying to adapt to, at the end of the day, what you're trying to ensure is that on the other side, on the user side, there's a positive change. So is there that positive change? Like I mentioned, even though he's gone, there's still sort of that form of leadership is now the standard form of leadership, right? So you look at this is that, are there still sort of the frequency of ideas and innovations according to the problem that you're trying to solve? So when I say that is, every organization is dynamic, right? So there'll be new problems coming up all the time. You might have faced one big problem, but they're day-to-day problems. Now, in solving those problems, are they in line with the original solution that was adaptive? Or, some solutions, you can be getting some solutions that are taking you back to square one. And now let me use that example again. So I think the FT, I don't know why the South African are just not leaving my head. There are elections coming up, right? And you look at it across the I think there are three major, and I don't know why I have South African politics in my head. There are three major parties. There's the ANC, the ruling party, the DA, and the EFF, right? when you look at it in terms of the spirit of Mandela, in the spirit of unity across South Africa, have the elections now gone back to sort of a racial, have elections now drawn across racial lines? No. Yeah, I mean, so that blacks are majority in South Africa, so most parties will be majority black. But you look at it, I've seen it, but you see the DA, which is the original Dutch party. The man is that there's some TikTok. I'm sorry, I'm a millennial. There's one TikTok. What's it called? TikTok dance challenge. That's like there's one that they bounce. Yes. So this is DA, the Dutch guy. He's like the whitest version of South African politics, actually doing the dance as part of this. So that means he recognizes that he has to have sort of like a 360 face for the entire South Africa. So he's not just trying to pander to just Africans, but he has Afrikaans, but then he also recognizes that they're black South Africans who this is from their culture or whatever. Right. So you look at it and even as a problem solving, South Africa is still not there's no perfect society, but you look at sort of the unifying leadership of Nelson Mandela, and it has continued that everybody sees themselves as South African. Inclusivity and collaboration. So that's another thing so as you're solving problems going forward, the voice, because for you to solve problem in an adaptive manner, you have to it has to be inclusive. So you can't sit down as CEO in your office and say you're doing adaptive leadership by yourself for yourself, right? So this way you call your management team, and if you want to really solve the problem, you're also going cadres down. So you just don't talk to your top management, you talk to the person at the front office, sort of walk through the chain, and you look at it. Are you still solving? Is your organization still inclusive and collaborative from sort of a leadership standpoint? And what is your employee engagement? Right. If you say an adaptive leader and you are getting zero feedback, I put it to you that you're probably just running a dictatorship in the office. That's not even without feedback. You're not even a leader.
Right.
Talk to us about adaptive leader.
Right. Sorry, just when you said that, it made me think about influencers again. They're always getting feedback via the comments. And
no. So in fact, I do have that social media influencers have a remarkable impact on followers for a reason. That they're not just broadcasters, but they're listeners. They actively engage in conversations, responding to comments, questions, and seeking feedback. And by tapping into collective intelligence and creativity of their community, they generate fresh ideas, insights, and solutions. I actually had that written.
Wow.
Yeah. So yes. So that's one of the reasons I'll say social media influence. Although I don't understand it, but I will categorize them as leaders.
All right. I would love if you can share, just now getting a bit more personal, not personal, but like if you can share a personal story where adaptive leadership has played a critical role in overcoming a significant challenge.
So I asked my team this question, and I was just like, but one of the, Jola here just reminded me of something. So if you, I don't even know whether I should say this. If you Google my name and my appointments, there's a very interesting, event around it, right? And so I remember when I was going to resume, of course, people are calling you. A lot of people have a lot of ideas as to how I should have started off my tenure after the event that happened. And I think for me, there was one thing, emotional intelligence, I think. And I think that's one thing I brought out in that. Whatever happened comes out of fear. So I just looked at it as a fear of the unknown, which is a natural human response to anything. Unless it is whatever we don't understand, whatever we don't know, the first response is fear, right? For a human being. Even if somebody took you to a door, right, and said, go in, who's in there, what's in there, you don't know. The person's like, I don't know what's in there. but you have to enter first. You'd be like, hold on. Wait, what's in there? I don't know. But you have to walk in there then first or blindfolded. It's a natural fear. You're like, all of a sudden your spidey senses are off, like, what's going on, right? So what I looked at the situation is it was just a fear-based response of the unknown, right? We had a good leader, and all of a sudden there's a change in leadership, right? And there's an emotional attachment. So once you yank off something that people are emotionally attached to, the response is fear. So for me, it was just go in there. The emotional intelligence was people responded out of fear. So you can't act out of fear or anger. So you go in there, and what you want to do is you do the opposite of what people expect you to do, which is to be as collaborative as possible, right? Just listen. And so it was, I think there was a week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4 expectations of retaliation. Yeah, but then and for me, it was just intelligence. Like, why would I want to start off with chaos, right? So it's almost like, yes, I would like this ideal situation. The situation isn't ideal. What I need to go there is be a leader. And what a leader does is recognize the emotions of people, validate the emotions of people, and alleviate their fears and build up their confidence in you, in the institution, in decisions. And that's what I did without going into too much detail. Yes.
Okay. With that, I'd like to move into now another component that's usually really important with adaptive leadership, which is just change management. What would you say are the most critical factors for successful change management in an organization based on your experience?
So I think the first thing is clear vision and objective for the change, right? So whatever it is, I mean, change management is anything from technology, people, processes. I mean, just basically you want to change something. So the first thing is, what is the objective? Because without clarity, there's the off chance clarity in objective and clarity in process. Without that, what you then do is you now have flip-flop of policy. So if things don't go as planned, which usually in life nothing goes as planned, you then now start sort of undulating between policies, right? Which sends the wrong message. Obviously, strong leadership, not just, and when I always say leadership, I don't like it to be just one person at the top, right? Because what the one person at the top who has the vision or the top management has to do is ensure that you have collaborators. So for change management, you need strong leadership as a team. That is with the topmost leader, the CEO, or whoever is at the head of it, and a team of collaborators who are also in the system.
And share that same
change champions. We call them change champions, right? Because you can't change everything by yourself. You can't change anything by yourself except for yourself. Obviously, effective communication and feedback. Because when you're changing things, again, people, no matter what system you're running, unless you're running a pure AI system, which I don't know if it exists anywhere. But once you have human beings in the sort of in the scope of your work, right? You have to have feedback because people have feelings about whatever you're going to change, whether positive or negative. And so you have to create an effective communication and feedback loop to ensure that people feel heard and validated. You don't have to do everything that because everybody has an opinion, but that everybody feels like their opinion has been heard, analyzed. And obviously, so early employee engagement, so you let people know, I don't like this thing of, catch them unawares. If you want to change something, you just wake up one morning because it's not going to work, right? Like you want to change the system, like I don't want them to get. So you always need to have peer engagement. There's a program, good example, when I was working at Central Bank of Nigeria, there was this cashless policy, which isn't a new policy. So everybody thinks the cashless policy is new. The cashless policy started in 2012. Yeah. Yes. So 2012, and I was on the team that developed the cashless policy. We spent an entire year after we had developed the policy in-house, collaboratively with the industry. We spent an entire year on the road, in every state, in every local government, talking to market women, bankers, schools, organized labor, organized industries on the policy, the effects, and the go live. We spent an entire year. We broke up into teams, I think the only state, then Boko Haram was still, so I think that we didn't go to Borno and Zamfara. I think those are the only two states we didn't go to, but we did each state twice. And even after the announcement of the launch, there was still uproar. In fact, we then had to roll back to show you how there can be nothing, there's no such thing as over communication, and there's no such thing, right? And so you can imagine if there's even no communication and you want to change something, it's going to fall flat on its face. Right? Just the example, 2 iterations of state by state, local government by local government engagement. And still, there was still a thing of we weren't engaged, we need more time, right? So the engagement and empowerment, letting people feel like, and not even just feel like, know that they're part of the process. So you listen to them. So for example, I think in that policy, it was initially 150,500. It was then moved to 500,000 for individuals, and then 3 million. So which is the cash free, where you don't have to pay the penalty. Sorry, let me get that. But but still, it was like even after that, we still had to shift the goal, not shift the goalposts, but move on our initial policy because we listened to people. And even after listening to people still had something to say, and we moved the policy again, because at the end of the day, it's user driven, right? So you can't make policies for people without their input.
Right. At what point though do you draw the line? Like, okay, if you do need the user input, but you're trying to drive change.
I think in most places that's where you need data, because you then need the data to inform, so people, let people know that this is an informed decision. It wasn't just pulled out of it wasn't an every decision. It was data. So when you show people the data, and I think then it was like, okay, so 150,000 means that they say 5% of Nigerians have 150,000 or less in their bank account at the time. So if I tell you that you can only do 150,000 naira a day free, it shows that it covers at least 5% of the, and then those small users who do more than 1 million make up a minority. So what we're doing that these cash quote unquote fees affect only like 10% of that. So once you have the data, and I think that's where a lot of times we go wrong, because we can't show the data, we can't show how we got to the policy in the policy formulation.
Right. Okay. I feel like you've answered a lot of the questions in course of that specific example, but there's some things that I still would love to hear from you, and I think our audience would benefit from hearing, is how do you balance like adaptive leadership with maintaining a clear direction, that clear vision that you mentioned earlier? How do you find the balance there?
So I think one is setting clear expectations and boundaries. So change management, this is how I look at change management. So it's like I have this phone, right, and the battery is bad. I want to upgrade the battery. So change management, the way I see it is, I need to remove the battery, fix the battery, but I need the phone to be working while I do that. So change management, you're trying to change a part of your operations, a part of your processes or something, right? But you don't want it to affect
it running
your organizational operations, right? And so that's why there's an entire program around it to ensure that there's a feedback loop, it doesn't affect your day-to-day. So when you set clear expectations, so my clear expectation is, using my analogy, I want the phone to be, I need to remove the battery, but I still need to be able to receive calls. Right? So what are my expectations as I am changing this, and I'm adapting to. So you're trying to change. You're trying to adapt already to what you're changing, right? I don't know if I'm clear.
No.
Yes.
Okay. I can see it in my head. So you need to be clear about one, what you're trying to change and what you're trying to adapt to at the same time. So you're trying to change a process because you're trying to adapt to a new operating environment. Let me use the Nigerian Postal Service as an example, right? So globally, and this is not a Nigerian phenomenon, mail volumes have dropped because of technology. People don't send letters, everything is an email. People don't even use faxing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have my operational basis, I have my operational assets geared towards sort of courier, mail delivery and everything. But at the same time, I'm trying to adapt to my environment and be like, okay, I have these assets, I need to optimize them. What else can I use my assets for? While I'm still doing this, right? I'm still doing my traditional standard operation, which is postal operations, right? But I want to adapt. I want to sort of change my processes in-house so that I can offer other services that are relevant to my operational environment. My operational environment, nobody sends mails anymore. And let's say, for example, one of the things we're trying to do is KYC, right? Know your customer services for banks, because one thing that the Nigerian Postal Service is that we have people everywhere. So if I need to KYC somebody in Damaturu, there is a NIPOST in Damaturu. I don't need to send somebody from Lagos to go to Damaturu, right? But so now that I'm doing KYC services, I have to look at my operations, like my HR, how I have organized the 10,000 plus people in my post, and be like, if I want to start removing people from sort of core operations, start doing KYC, start doing financial services, start doing any other service that we think is more relevant to our operating environment. I still need them to know, the people to know that the objective is that NIPOST continues to function, continues to be profitable, regardless of what you're doing. So they'll come and tell me that, no, but I'm an operations staff, I'm an engineering and technical services staff. Like, no, so the clear objective is that NIPOST has to stay afloat, NIPOST has to be operational, NIPOST has to be profitable. That is the objective. Now, when I am moving, being fluid, flexible, like, okay, yes, you're in operations, but you can do KYC. Yes, you're a mailman, but because you move around, you can also do KYC. So that's the objective, right? And so I think for me, so that objective was our north point is productivity and profitability. How we do it on the inside and sort of rejig and remove and move things inside is sort of what I would say is the adaptive part of it.
Got it. Okay. I want to open it up for our students to ask some questions, but I'm curious if you have any advice. Because I've had conversations recently that really highlights this, like people wanting to get specific pieces of advice that they can action on. So where adaptive leadership skills are concerned, do you have specific advice that people can start implementing now? Whether it's developing emotional intelligence, is one of the things that you mentioned, just in general.
I don't know about being prescriptive. It's hard to be prescriptive. Right? So what I wrote here, and I'm sorry if it doesn't meet up to, is unlearn, learn, and relearn. I don't know how else to put it. So for example, unlearn. So adaptive leadership is you have to understand your operating environment. So regardless of what you're doing, what is the context? So this is Miva, right? So Miva is an educational institution. All of a sudden, people now say that, Nigerians don't want to go to school anymore, right? They want to stop at senior secondary, and that's okay for everyone. So what does Miva do? What does the chancellor of Miva, what does the vice chancellor of Miva do, right? And so for that, is that unlearning that is Miva an educational institution? It's just a higher learning institution, or maybe we can start doing some other sort of maybe senior secondary. I'm not saying your operating model is great, but maybe senior secondary. So you unlearn that. Oh, I need professors, I need lecturers. So maybe I just need teachers, right? Learn. So how do they run a senior secondary school? It's not the same way, because for senior secondary, because most people are considered juvenile, right? So there's more a disciplinary element to running a secondary school. And then, so that's learning. And then relearning, what are some of the things from running a higher institution that can bring into running a senior secondary or secondary, or, So that's why I say learn, unlearn. So it's depending on what it is. Don't be too married to goals. be married to values and ideas and knowledge. So knowledge and values actually. Having your own values, your principle. What is your end goal? What do you want to do in life? So that's your north point, right? And then learn what you need to learn to get there, or learn what is holding you back. So is there any idea, any principle that's holding you back from that? Maybe you find that you have to stay back in Nigeria to do what you want to do, but every day you and your prophet have been prophesying Japan to Australia for you. So you have to unlearn that prophecy. You know, so and it's one of those things we're human nature, we're very married to our goals and objectives and what it is. So I think is that being flexible at heart and in your mind. So unlearn, learn and relearn, right? But the north goal is what it is you want to achieve. Right? And being flexible enough that and humble enough to know that you didn't know everything from the beginning. So you have to stay flexible. So for example, you look at it, I have 2 degrees in engineering. Then I ended up in financial services. I've done financial services, I've done investment promotion, I've done environmental services, I've done tech policy, and now I'm doing postal operations. Not one time have I used my engineering degree. Not once. Right? And for me, and I think that my north point was always I wanted to make impact in the public sector. So even if you look at my private sector experience, it's government facing. So for me, it was just make impact in public sector. So even when I found myself in the private sector, how do I make impact on the other side, which is helping government formulate policies that affect technology companies.
Right.
So being that voice at the table in government saying, yeah, this is what you want to do, but this is how the tech companies feel. And because I had worked in government as well, when I go back to the table on the private sector side, like, look, this thing cannot fly because this is how government works. So being that voice on both sides. And for me, that's just public sector. So wherever I find myself, all I know is that public sector, because we all know that public sector in Nigeria needs all of us as much as possible. And that's always been my mission. So wherever I find myself, I'm flexible enough to know it's not how I do it, it's what I am doing.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we'll take some questions.
Okay.
I'll have some closing questions, but we'll just open the floor up to questions.
Good afternoon. All right, so my question is, does NIPOST have any plans to partner with some government agencies? Because I know, like in the UK, for instance, your international passport can be delivered to you in person. So does NIPOST have any plan on sort of alleviating that burden of Nigerians?
Okay. Yes. So I mentioned. So one of the things that NIPOST has, which I always say that our forefathers in Nigeria and history have with NIPOST, is a footprint in every single local government in Nigeria.
Right.
And again, that was because mail had to be delivered to every local government, which isn't the case anymore. And so you look at it that we have all these assets. What can we do? And I think the tagline is being a platform for inclusive economic prosperity. So that's even the tagline. It's not even postal. So if you see our new tagline, it has nothing to do with postal services. Yes, they're postal services. Inclusive economic prosperity all over Nigeria. And that includes, alleviating burdens and helping SMEs and whatever. So one of our plans is to use some of the spaces within all our locations for government services. So not just passport services, NIN, your birth record, death records, voters card. So right now, yes. So that is in the plan. So that way we bring. NIPOST was always, even from history, it was the one representation of federal government in every single locality. So what we do is bring government to the last mile to people. And so in sort of adapting NIPOST to our new operating environment is that how do we continue to be the face of government in every locality, which is this time around bringing government services closer to the last mile, both rural, semi-rural, and urban areas.
All right, thank you. Just a follow-up question, sorry.
Sure.
So, what are you doing in terms of the image of NIPOST? Because for me personally, I'm a millennial, so I've heard certain of my friends say that, they sent something to NIPOST and it got missing. chocolate, 1 cent chocolates. And they ate, like for you to know, they ate out of it and left the remaining. So in terms of securing properties, how can you build the trust of
so yes, the Nigerian Postal Service, like most massive organizations, has issues. So so since I resumed, I think one of the things we've been doing is, of course, beefing up our operational capacity, which is, so NIPOST is over 100 years old, right? So the Postal Service, not NIPOST itself, but the Postal Service, the assets that we run are over 100 years old, right? And so there's culture over 100 years and things like that. So the first thing you have to do is sort of beef up your operational capacity. And as opposed to doing a rebrand, change the logo, change the color, there's no point just slapping on paint on something that. So it's the slow and hard work. Trust me, the slow and hard work of sort of rebuilding your operations from scratch, your operational capacity, both for domestic and international. It's slow and it's a lot of work. Well, that's the first thing we're trying to do, and sort of without making any announcements, so that people in themselves, not me, experience it, and then we can then start we're rebranding and we're doing this. But the hard work also ensuring that we are operating optimally is the hard work that's being done now. Apologies to your friend for his half-eaten chocolate. And just in case anybody else has any questions or missing parcels or anything like that, again, it's the same thing. I'm not making excuses for anything, because it's something that I have to deal with, right? But it is basically all I've been doing now. So even all these things like government services or financial services, even though we're working on it simultaneously, the hard work is first. The main business of mine was how do we even get it back to standard, right? Before we even start talking to government standard, not even to private sector standard, to government standard. Because, and I noticed this, even a lot of people still use NIPOST. Yeah, a lot of people still use NIPOST because you think about it, right? Which is why I said our last mile. In my hometown, there's no DHL, there's no GIG, there's nothing. There's only NIPOST, right? And so I look at it as a responsibility that to make Nigerians included across, not just Nigerians in Lagos or Abuja or Port Harcourt or Kaduna or Katsina, across Nigeria. We have a duty, myself and the rest of the management and team at NIPOST have to ensure that NIPOST works, because if NIPOST works, Nigeria actually works. Because it's a representation of Nigeria. Right? So that's the slow, hard work. Yes, and of course, I don't think I would have taken the job if I thought that it wasn't something that was possible. Right? But it's slow, it's hard, but the wheels are spinning, and hopefully your friend will send chocolate through NIPOST again. Because he has full confidence that he'll get there for not eating.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
NIPOST, you said that NIPOST is a almost 100-year-old organization now. So obviously there's going to be some old mindsets that people in your organization will have. How do you, when you entered NIPOST as a CEO, how did you change the mindset that people had? How did you change the culture of that organization?
So how do you change the culture of an organization? I think for me, it's showing that the alternative is a better option, right? So you almost have to show people human beings were naturally, we're logical and illogical actually. I don't think we're naturally logical, but we're both. But I think that people would always go for what suits them better, because we always want the best for ourselves. So if I say that this is how you've been running it, well, you could run it like this, right? Whatever it is, your I don't want to sound, you still get the same results, right? Well, in fact, you get a better result. You'll be prouder of NIPOST, you'll be prouder of your work if you did it like this. And to be fair to the people of NIPOST, again, one of the things I don't do is require of people what they don't have, right? So if you don't equip people with certain skills, if they're not equipped with certain skills, you can jump and shout and scream all you want. They can't give it to you. So one of the things that we've done with some of our partners is we're running like trainings, I'm seeing the notifications for trainings and I'm always asking them, please, when are these people going to work? So even things as simple as Microsoft tool, right? PowerPoint presentation, Excel spreadsheet, data analysis, like infusing data into what you do. So as opposed to making decisions like this because that's how we did it in 1960, that's how we did it in 1970. So we put the bus on the road every Tuesday because that's how it was done in 70, 80, 90. But let's look at the data. How much mail comes on Monday and Sunday and Mondays? Why should you move on Tuesday? Maybe you should move on Friday, or maybe you should move on Thursday. So one of the major things is infusing data into a lot of decision making so that they see themselves. I'm not saying this is how you should do it. This is what the data says you should do for us to be more productive. So I think it's not necessarily beating it into people's heads like, oh, this is how you use the private sector. It's just showing people that this is a better way to do it. And so far, it's been a wonderful experience. And I just realized that people just want to be acknowledged. They want to be respected, and people actually want to work, right? So NIPOST also is an aging, and I'll say it's an aging, institution that you have a lot of old hands. And trust me, regardless of what anybody thinks, some of those old hands will tell you things and show you things and give you lectures that no book, no operating manual. Yeah, their wisdom. And that, in fact, one of the things we want to do is also start documenting that, because a lot of the people who've been there, who've held that institution through rough times, are aging out of the system. What we're doing is we're onboarding new people, ensuring that we're, unlike what happened before, we're equipping them with what they need for them to be successful.
Okay. In terms of adaptability, I was thinking if it's possible to include more services that could be beneficial to NIPOST. For example, if NIPOST could become the DHL of Nigeria, for example, in terms of delivering government documents, if it's possible to have an application in which when the document is transferred from NIPOST office, I could easily track it, so we don't have missing documents, for example, missing chocolates. So we could easily track it. And in terms of adding more services, like, for example, when people are trying to receive parcels from outside of Nigeria, it could go through NIPOST, so that also generates revenue for NIPOST and it increases the operational standards.
Okay,
yeah.
So I can clearly see none of you are doing NIPOST well. You can actually track not registered mails. There's a difference. Registered mail is just a stamp on the people, which you can't track that anywhere in the world. You can't track it on Royal Mail, but for any other thing, any of your premium services, you can actually track. And in terms of receiving international mail, any mail that comes from any other designated organization, so there's a Universal Postal Union, under which all postal organizations operate. So NIPOST, Royal Mail, USPS, we're all members of the same thing. So if you send anything through Royal Mail, USPS, China Post, Singapore Post, you actually get it through NIPOST. So you actually get it through NIPOST. So by multilateral agreement, NIPOST processes all the things that come through. And because again, in terms of everything, NIPOST wears two hats. It's a regulator and an operator. So we also have to be careful not to want to crowd out other operators, because we don't want to start using sort of government fiat to crowd out people's businesses, because that's creating wealth in the country. So we also have to, that's why we limit ourselves to only what comes in through other designated organizations, which by UPU fiat we have to process. But every other thing we use UPU and DHL or whatever. Some of the other carriers do use us for their processing, but they don't have to.
Thank you.
Oh, we have a question in the back.
My question is actually direct. When I say directives, adaptive leadership in line with what we see in our country as leadership. What better explanation can you give us? Because you mentioned in your conversation inclusiveness, emotions, collaboration. But today we see in leadership where decisions are taken and a whole total of 150 million, 250 million Nigerians are not inclusive. They don't think of how they tend to cope through it. Okay, let's take for instance the example of the cashless policy. We didn't finish recovering from COVID. We went into cashless. We could barely get 1,000 naira, and we are in a country where there is leadership. Is it that what you people see in parastatals and ministries are not in the same light with what people who are at the presidency tend to see as regarding the masses? What do you have to say about it?
Okay, so thank you. So first of all, I will address the example that you gave, and then I'll just give a general answer. So first of all, that wasn't a cashless policy. That was a cash redesign policy. Because I worked on the cashless policy, I need to safeguard it from, there are two different things, right? So that was a cash redesign policy. And so in terms of leadership or presidency or whatever, the central bank, this is just the Central Bank of Nigeria, is an independent institution. The central bank does not respond or report to anybody. They only report to the board of the central bank, because any monetary regulator has to be completely independent. So even in the US, the head of the Federal Reserve does not report to President Joe Biden, because you need to have that complete independence, right? So having worked in Central Bank of Nigeria, and I'm not holding grief for anybody, but I just need to respond. Having worked in Central Bank of Nigeria, there is no policy that comes out of the Central Bank of Nigeria that is not backed by data. Can it be implemented better? Probably, right? But that there's no policy in itself in vacuum that is created that will pass through the checks and balances of the Central Bank of Nigeria that's created just to make life harder for Nigerians. I just need to, I'm not holding grief. But having worked there, it's an institution of I respect the Central Bank of Nigeria, probably one of the institutions I respect most because I work there. So now in terms of just leadership, one of the things in leadership, one of the downsides of leadership is making hard decisions. Again, I am not holding grief for anything. Just even just think of myself, it's making hard decisions. Deferring making hard decisions now to defer suffering down the road, right? And this is just generally. And I know most times when policies are made, because I mean we have the National Assembly, we have the executive, and we have the judicial. I think as Nigerians, we probably hear more about the executive, and we don't engage the legislative as much as we should. That I know that most policy decisions that come out of government have been engaged at the National Assembly, and the ones that aren't, that's when you hear National Assembly saying, you know what, this policy hasn't been assessed by us, because that's where the checks and balances come from. So I think that my thing is, there's no policy that government makes, as far as I know, that is made specifically to make the lives of people harder. Sometimes they are hard decisions, and that's where it falls on the leader, right? So the leader makes the hard decision, and people are upset, and rightly so. They should be upset, right? Because it affects them negatively, just as for some people, as it's affecting some people negatively, it's affecting some other people positively, and it's always the balance that leaders have to make, particularly where it is something that makes the long run better. So if you think of the removal of subsidy and things like that, it is that in the long run, we're a healthier economy. It might be harder and everybody's feeling the pinch, but that in the long run, it makes the economy healthier. It makes, because investments come in, the government saves money and can spend on this, can spend on that. Government is inclusive. I wouldn't have been a part of this government if I thought I was not an inclusive government, because I've been in governments before and left the government. When you became just like, so I'm not, so if I didn't think it was an inclusive government, I would not be a part of this government. And even when I say the tagline, this tagline of inclusive economic prosperity is a top-down tagline, right? And it is people in higher authority realizing that for inclusive growth, and even for, if I look at NIPOST, in that looking at how do we create inclusive growth across the country, right? Where we are distributing accessibility, we're distributing wealth, and by that way we're enabling prosperity across the country. Is like organizations like NIPOST. Okay, NIPOST, you have to rise. After all these years of decay, we will rebuild you because this is what we want to do. Again, I'm not holding you friends. But from my point of view, that is it.
Thank you. Your question or mine?
My question.
Okay.
Sorry. It's a question slash, should I say advice? Can I advise you? Not advice. A suggestion. Let me use the word suggestion.
You can advise.
Alright, so let me use the word suggestion. Alright, so like I said, maybe because I'm a media and communications expert, I think one thing that boosts the confidence of people is, you mentioned something about feedback, right? So I just saw on Twitter, NIPOST is not very functional there. So maybe you take advantage of social media, right? Again, as I was going through, I saw another post of a missing iPhone 13, and there was no. Yeah, I mean.
No, maybe they tagged the wrong NIPOST handle.
I can see. it.
No. There are like 4 NIPOST handles.
Well.
So we're trying to consolidate. We're trying to shut down. But
Okay.
because the whole social, where's the person? He's outside.
Okay. So I mean, I know this was not your era. This was 2022. I said, iPhone 13 Pro Max, interesting. So I mean, feedback. Let there be that human aspect. That okay, when you do this, even for Nigerian immigration, even if someone tags the wrong posts and it is a dent on their own, they still go there to say that okay, this is not the situation. This is the situation. This will help boost the confidence of people.
So let me just. So we have a social. So I'm not a social. Even when I was coming, they're trying to take pictures of me, and I'm very squirming. I'm social media and I'm
It's TikTok dance.
Hey, no, because you can't. You can't. I'm not basically my mother. Do you understand? So no, but and obviously like I'm not super. Social media is, I see how it runs everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's an entire social media team. So maybe the person that runs it, he is running. So creating an entire cross-departmental social media team to just address, because coming in, I mean, you can imagine. You don't want to imagine the volumes of and that's why we even had to make sure the tracking was up and running so people can track their own things, but also addressing people's grievances, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's way, I mean, I'll give you an example. Somebody sent his documents for admissions in the US, right? And there were operational issues, not necessarily NIPOST's fault, but there were operational issues. And we could tell that the deadline was this past Monday, and he wasn't going to get there on time. Yeah. So what did I do? So when it was brought up to me, what did I do? I wrote a letter to the school admitting that it was not due to the person's error, that we get it across to them, but that for no reason should they, and it happened to be George Washington where I went, and in my master's, so I probably blackmailed them emotionally, saying that, it was such a great school for me, I don't want him to miss out on this opportunity, so please. And that is me taking ownership, right? Because normally it would just be somebody who just sent an email, but I wrote to the school. I didn't hear back from them. So that Monday, which was the deadline, I called the school by myself. I spoke to the admissions officer. I said he saw the email. So they're giving him an extension of 1 month and things like that. And that's, and that's because we need to rebuild that trust. So even when things go wrong, because things will go wrong, but for people to know that we'll do whatever it takes to resolve the issue, right? And where's the So yes, but thank you. Yes, we're working hard on social media, And I don't.
So you cut me off again. I just want to say your plans for recruitment. You said the old. He asked a question. They said you were phasing out the old.
Just tiring.
I wanted to ask: does NIPOST have the autonomy for recruitment? Because for me, I personally think you need a supply and chain expert. You need data analysts. You need media and communication. I'm just like in terms of recruitment. I don't. Okay, slightly I don't. I don't like the old Nigerian agencies of underground recruitment and everything. So does NIPOST have the autonomy to carry out recruitment, or like what are the processes and?
And so NIPOST being an agency, so yes, we have autonomy in recruiting. Obviously with the express permission of the head of service. So the office of the head of service will tell you how many people you can recruit based on budgets and things like that. But we do have the autonomy to recruit, and it's something that we have discussed in terms of. So as opposed to doing the regular way, just everybody just comes in, to be a bit more.
Streamlined?
Not even streamlined, to be a bit more targeted. Like,
Okay.
what do we need for this person? What do we need for this, based on where we're going to? So, for example, there's a project we're doing with the Nigerian AIDS Control Commission,
Okay.
Nigerian AIDS Control Agency, NACA, which is for biospecimen logistics. We're doing a pilot, and one of the things we do need for that is we need a chief microbiologist, which I've never. So those are some of the things that. So as we are sort of phasing in new products and things like that, we need to figure out how do we recruit them. So yes, so recruitment is definitely going to be different. It has to be different.
Mhm.
Yes.
And please, like I said, don't let it be underground. Like, just try. I know it's sometimes beyond your power. Just try to make it open. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dami. All right, we have a couple questions from our online, sent online, so I just want to get to them. So one, is NIPOST profitable today, and how has NIPOST adapted to today's society?
So in terms of profitability, the NIPOST isn't profitable yet for a couple of reasons. Well, I mentioned the downtrend in mail volumes, and unfortunately, the organization has not completely sort of pivoted to new products yet. They're in the works, but as we launch them, the NIPOST becomes more profitable. Then why else I would be profitable? There was something else that came to my mind. We also have this thing called the Universal Service Obligation by the Universal Postal Union, which is it's our global union under the United Nations. So there's something called the Universal Service Obligation that. So for example, if you wanted to be profitable, you have a leaner structure, you would have less outlets, right?
Yeah.
But because of the Universal Service Obligation, which gives there's a number of postal offices and postal agents, there's a ratio
Per square meter?
per population and square meter.
Okay.
So if you have to run those by fiat, sometimes you can't be as profitable. And I think, yes, we want to get to profitability, but what we want to actually do more of is impact.
Mm-hmm.
So the more impact we have, there's impact versus profitability. As impact grows, profitability will come, right? And also the Universal Service Obligation also allows us to charge commercial rates, right? So if you look at it, I don't think there's any non-privatized postal service in the world. I think USPS lost $6 billion last year. No, they lost $3 billion last year. Down, so they've been profitable by losing less money, and I think that it's one of the things that then what the government looks at. It's not necessarily profitability. Yes, there's that, but also in terms of what is your value add to the country. So for me, it is value add and then profitability. So even if I'm not profitable, if the people around the NIPOST communities where I am in rural areas, in areas where there's nothing for the next 7 kilometers. So instead of them getting on a bike for 10 kilometers to go to the next bank, if they can cash out their 2,000, 3,000 at NIPOST, if they can do their telemedicine at the NIPOST location, if they can do their NIN, if they can get some of their social investment, social protection programs in NIPOST, then technically I'm profitable.
Right. Well, you just said, I think there's also a space for if they can do their online learning at a NIPOST.
Oh yes.
With
I think there
freelance
were,
and education.
there's some NIPOST locations that have computer labs already.
Okay, we'll have a separate conversation about that. Another question from our online audience is, how do you promote adaptability while dealing with government bureaucracies?
I don't want to sound like, and I don't want to sound disingenuous or like I'm being is like I'm just outing government. I think that in the context that we live in today, the sort of where Nigeria is today, and I think Nigeria isn't different from most of the world. I think it will be foolhardy of any government to think that how it was done before is profitable for Nigeria. The bureaucracies that existed when dollar was 18 naira is the same bureaucracies that should exist when dollar is 1,000 and north. So I don't know whether I would say I am lucky in that there is there's a tangible knowledge in government that bureaucracy, red tape can't work. How things need to be done can't work. The slow grind of government is how it should be. So I think with the infusion of, I think I'm also very lucky that the team I work with, my minister, my colleagues in other sister agencies, and some of the agencies that I have to work with. So if you think of NIMC, my minister, that comes at NCC, SMED and Naseni, I think there's a network of people now that understand speed and understand the real sort of emergency in getting things done. Right. So again, maybe I'm just lucky. Or the government is doing something right in that there's an understanding that bureaucracy and red tape will not move this country forward. And if you look at recently, I think during Ramadan, when the president had iftar, I think the day he had it with National Assembly members, and spoke about allowing heads of agencies to do their work, because we find that a lot of oversight work, which is National Assembly is allowed to do, but that it needs to be more streamlined. Right? So those are some of the things that slow down government, because there's a lot of oversight work that's even taking more time than the operational work. And so there's a real understanding that, I don't have to answer this question, bureaucracy and red tape, I think what it is that government itself has adapted to the fact that things need to change. And so the problem is not that things need to change, it's that how fast we can do it within the law. So there's some things that you cannot change by law. If something has to be, for example, if it's a procurement process, you need to do something, there's a procurement by the Public Procurement Act, you have to advertise for 6 weeks. You have to advertise for 6 weeks. But then what happens is after the 6 weeks, you ensure that you finish opening the bids and everything in 1 week to make it fast, as opposed to waiting another 6 weeks to open the bid. So yes, there are things in law that take time, but there is a real understanding now that there needs to be speed in everything that gets done.
Right.
So government itself has adapted. I think so. It's not even me adapting. I think it's government has adapted.
Makes sense. Okay, I think we can take one more question if there's any more question here in the room. Okay.
When you are made CEO of NIPOST, right, and you wanted to make all these changes, make it more adaptable, did you face any backlash?
Not backlash, resistance. And resistance, I mean, if you want, it's the fact you. So if you've done anything, if you ever change any policy, there'll always be resistance, because again, people fear what they don't understand or what they don't know. So the resistance, so the way you only deal with it is you explain the reason for your changes. Again, there's some reasons, you state your reasons, you listen. As the CEO, the final decision is yours. But I think that's where you need a lot of humility in listening to people, because you also have to understand that, say if I think of that NIPOST, the most senior director has been there for 34 years, right? So if she's telling me that something is not going to work, I need to listen to her, right? I need to look at the data and I need to judge it. The final decision is mine, but I have to be humble enough to listen to the person that's been there for 30 years, for 29 years, the person that has been direct, just as the person that has retired from there. I have to be humble enough to listen and flexible in my thoughts, be like, okay, yes, it might work this way, this policy I can state it this way, or I balance it, I find a way of merging their suggestions into it, or phasing it, things like that. But not backlash, resistance, which is no.
So how do you handle that resistance?
Yeah, so you explain, and you listen, you explain your point, your reasons, and you use whatever your data, whatever reasoning process that you use, and then you listen, right? You listen, and you make the final decision based on what you've heard, right? And I guess that's why you're the CEO. You have to make the final decision, but you always have to listen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. The final question that I have, before I even ask it, I don't think I introduced you as the Postmaster General, but that's my favorite title. Well, so, building on the question I was just asked, if you were given the chance to do this again, and this being entering into your position as Postmaster General, CEO of NIPOST, at the time that you were entering in and having to do all the adaptive leadership, change management, and all of the long-term plans that you have for the organization, would you do it again?
Absolutely. So yeah, underneath, underneath, and I'll be honest here, underneath if you've seen any NIPOST office recently, right? It's a bit grim, right? But over time, what you then realize is when you sort of overlook that and you look at the potential of the Nigerian Postal Service, what is possible using the agriculture, health, education. The sky is the limit, and the good thing is that the Postal Act of 2004 allows NIPOST to do anything. Postal services and any other services it deems fits, right? And so there's a whole world. So at least within my ministry, under the leadership of my minister, I don't think I would take any other organization. It's the hard work, which is interesting. It's frustrating, it's stressful. Sometimes you want to tear your head out, and you're just like, I'm done. But when you I sit down and think of the potential for Nigeria, right? It is some of the use cases. I mentioned telemedicine, biomedical specimen control, agricultural soil testing, agricultural aggregation in rural areas, agri-logistics, financial services, government services, haulage. It's almost like you're rebuilding the base network of Nigeria. Because when you look, having lived in Lagos, worked in Abuja, you don't understand Nigeria, right? If those are the two reference points. And you realize just giving somebody access to the town, to the state capital within their state, giving them a 1 or 2 hour window access to that place changes the entire fortunes of their family. You go to, I don't want to mention, there's a state in the southwest where they grow pineapples, massive pineapples, right? But you go there and they sell it for 2 naira, 3 naira, 5 naira, because they need to sell it before it spoils. But if I can tell that guy that I will bring a 10-ton truck and take those pineapples straight from that home village to Mount 12 market within 3 hours in Nigeria, in Lagos, I've completely changed his fortune, right? And so what you're doing, and we have so many projects, Trade Force, which is linking every single NIPOST office with external trade, right? Where people create things in their villages, and they have access to the African market through the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, right? So you literally are potentially changing the fortunes of Nigeria. So that's where the inclusivity comes from. It's not the person that lives in Lagos, Abuja, or Port Harcourt who can do that. It's the person living in Malaysia, my hometown, where there are like 3 banks or something, and even my town is not even really, it's not even a remote. Exactly, and so that you think of the remotest parts of Nigeria, you're giving them access to trade, access to facilities. Think of health. So you're reducing mortality in villages. You think of agriculture, you're giving them access to solve the food crisis in Nigeria. Education, where village children can have access to sort of modern devices in it. And that's what NIPOST is. In fact, I always joke that if they remove the actual postal services from it, like I don't even want to move anybody's envelope anymore. Just give me the other value-added services, and I'm good, right? So for me, it's a yes. I would always be thankful to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for this opportunity.
So it really shows like your passion for the service and what you want to do with it. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today. Please.
Even agreeing to come to like what NIPOST was that? So thank you for at least listening to the dreams of this female who just wants to have impact on Nigeria through the last agency everybody will think of, which is the Nigerian Postal Service.
Great. Thank you so much again. I want to give our Vice Chancellor an opportunity to just give a vote of thanks and comments.
Thank you. Hello, students. It's good to have you all here. You want me to come there?
No, continue, sir.
Okay, all right. So, my duty is simple, but for me, I've benefited a lot from here. I'll pick about 10 points, and I believe most of them must have picked those. First is emotional intelligence. You need to develop that and have that because it's very, very important. And to also talk about the story of South Africa, where you want to put in emotional intelligence, adaptive leadership, you need to put in place justice. Justice is very, very important. And then whoever is going to do adaptive leadership must also be able to have capacity for innovation. Yes, that is growth. And everybody in the organization must be willing to support growth. So I pick that also. And also there is need for ethics and character, which is very, very key. So I'm saying all this for our students because we want you to become leaders tomorrow, because they are the brightest faces of the future. So if you key in this, she has told us a lot of things within this short period of time. So my first point is let me thank the organizers. They are my teams, and the studio team, the commercial team, the operation team, and then the rapporteur. And I also want to thank the anchor, our VP operations. So thank you so much. And to our students, you are the best. You are the face of the future. We appreciate you for what you are doing. So before I go further to appreciate our masterclass presenter today, I think that's always been different when you have the other agenda here. When we have women here, that's always been different. So I like to support men and women at the top because you see the impact is always very, very huge. And she also told us here that in NIPOST, the opportunities there are huge, which I believe she'll be able to turn it around. So I want to appreciate you for coming, for finding time to come, to impact on us. So I want to say thank you. And dear students, I want you to stand up. Let's give her a round of applause, please.